Okay, hi guys. Welcome to Short Film Saturdays.
Hi.
We are here with two really special filmmakers from Guatemala, as well as a Dominican American, and I think it's Guyanese filmmaker. So we're repping a lot of places today. But as you guys know, this is Latin American Heritage Month in the US. It's being celebrated, but in Soleil style, we celebrate our diasporas globally. And these two women really represent that. And the topics that they cover in their films are going to be a really good discussion in celebration of that. So really excited. For those of you who don't know me and who aren't familiar with Short Film Saturdays, if this is your first one, my name is 𝗬𝗢𝗡𝗚 I'm the CEO of SoleSpace, and we are a media company in Brooklyn, New York. Our mission is to achieve a more equitable and representative global film and television landscape. Our focus is on the global diasporas of Asia, Africa, Latin America, the Caribbean, and the Middle East, with the goals of elevating untold stories from these cultures and from these creatives, hence why we have this platform of Short Film Saturdays. And the goal is also to form closer transcultural community bonds among people of color around the world and provide opportunities and resources for these creators to produce premium world-class content. So we specialize in film, TV, and editorial media with this goal to elevate these underrepresented voices from these regions that we think aren't often seen or authentically represented in the global mainstream. And there's no better way to do that than short films, which we think are the purest form of a filmmaker's artistic expression. Oftentimes it's their first effort or first few efforts. And some filmmakers choose to just make short films, which is now becoming a thing. So you guys are seeing more and more high quality short films that we're fortunate to feature in SoleSpace. So since launching Short Film Saturdays, we've featured 67 films from 54 filmmakers in 26 countries to date. We're really, really proud of the diversity. And we have a first here with our first Guatemalan director, actress, and producer, Marisa Toriello. Marisa is a stunt coordinator for the film Señora Genovese, directed by Daniela Arguello, which is now on HBO. She is a manager and producer of the film The Eye on the Wall, directed by Javier Del Cid, an official selection of Blood Window Screenings 2020, and the lead actress in Romeo López Aldana's short film Asphyxia, an official selection of Cinequest Film Festival. She's also director and writer of the short film It's Not Easy, which you will see today, a production of Universidad Marroquin's Film and Entrepreneurship School. So Marisa, say hi and do a brief intro to the film. No spoilers.
All right. No spoilers. First off, it's an honor to be here. So thank you, Mika, for that intro. Gabriella, it's an honor to be sharing the screen with you. And well, yeah, I don't want to say much about the film since we're about to watch it. I'll just say that it's the first short film I ever directed. I've done some things since then, but it's really special to my heart, and I hope you'll enjoy it.
All right. And now let me introduce Gabriella Moses, an award-winning director, writer, and production designer based in Brooklyn, New York. She's a graduate of NYU's Tisch School of the Arts. Her latest short films, Sticky Fingers and Leche, are currently playing the festival circuit, and her award-winning thesis film, Las Mañanitas, I hope I pronounced that right, Mañanitas, has played at numerous international film festivals, winning Best Ensemble Cast, Production Design, and Score at NYU's First Run Film Festival, and Best Film at the Catra Film Fest series. Her production design work has been featured across top festivals, including Sundance Film Festival, Toronto, Tribeca, South by Southwest. Her clients include Vogue, Estee Lauder, Instagram, Google, Casper, Target, and Walmart, to name a few. Gabriella was selected by the Hispanic Coalition of New York as one of their 2015 Rising Latino Stars, and she also served as a shadow director for the 2015 ABC Diversity Showcase. Gabriella is currently developing her directorial debut feature, Leche. So you guys are going to see the short film Leche, and she's developing her feature Leche, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit. And the 2017 NIWIFT from, she's developing that as part of support from the 2016 Sundance Institute's Creative Producing Lab, the 2017 NIWIFT from Script to Pre-Production Workshop, 2018 Sundance Screenwriters Intensive, 2018 Tribeca Film Institute Access Lab, and 2018 Gabriella Figueroa Film Fund Program. Welcome, Gabriella. That's quite a bio. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for that introduction, 𝗧𝗛𝗢𝗏. And again, very excited to watch your film, Marisa, and thank you as well for sharing the screen today and being here. I know there's a lot of exciting filmmakers who have screened part of Soleil. Leche, as Mika mentioned, is part of, it was a proof of concept for a feature that I got to develop through the Sundance Creative Labs originally, and I figured what's a better way to try and develop this story and work with our young lead for the first time. And so we had casted 𝗬𝗢𝗨𝗥. Making features is a very difficult process, so the film has been in development for 6 years, and we actually recently recasted right before we pitched the project for Untold Stories, which is a $1 million grant program with Tribeca and HBO Max, and AT&T is the main sponsor. But yeah, it's a film that mixes magical realism and spirituality and otherness, which I believe is one of the fitting in and assimilation is one of the themes here today with our film series. And it was a blessing to make. It was my third short film, and I learned a lot from it in terms of consolidating a bigger story into something when exploring minorities within minority groups and how sometimes within our own communities we can be the worst people in like propagating self-hatred and ideas of what beauty standards are. So I was sort of exploring that in colorism within this story through a young girl's perspective.
Awesome. All right, you guys are in for a treat. The way this works is we're now going to stream the two films. We're going to start with Leche, and then we're going to go to It's Not That Easy. And then once the screenings are done, stay tuned because we're going to have a really great Q&A with the two filmmakers, and the audience will be able to ask their questions. A lot of you are used to this, but this is for the newbies, and it's going to be lit as always. So thanks a lot and enjoy the show. All right. So we're back, everyone. Thank you so much for such a lively conversation. We saw the chat going as usual. This is great. And we can't wait to get into this Q&A because I know that you guys will have a lot of questions. Because you were doing so much during the film, make sure and drop your comments in. If you have questions, drop them in later down so we don't lose them, okay? All right, so for those of you who just joined, this is Short Film Saturdays with SoleSpace, and we are celebrating today Latin American Heritage Month with two filmmakers, female filmmakers, directors from the Latin American diaspora. We have filmmaker Marisa, who is from Guatemala, and we also have Gabriella with us, who is Latino American, Dominican American, Guyanese filmmaker. So we're representing a lot here, a little Caribbean in there. And so what you guys just saw was the two films in order. First, Gabriella Moses, Milk, and then Marisa Toriello, It's Not That Easy, right? So we're going to start Q&A now with the filmmakers, and we'll do it in the order that you saw the film. So the first film that you saw was Leche by Gabriella Moses. So Gabriella, let's talk. There's a lot to unpack here, right? I don't think we'll have space to really talk about all of the
I'm ready.
Yeah, this film is so layered. You draw so many contrasts, which I think are really awesome. excellent job, first of all, and you could see the audience reaction, right? So it follows a young girl with albinism, and you do something so unique, is that you use albinism to draw contrast and tell a story that's also about colorism, right? Usually when you see stories about colorism, it's, you know, it's one-dimensional, right? And you're seeing it from the colored person's point of view. She's a colored person, but she's also albino. So how did you come to that? Because that's just creativity and insight that I think is super powerful.
Yeah, I think so I had seen this article actually that was on my like Facebook feed. This old classmate from high school had posted about this young boy who was 10, this young white male who was had hunted and killed an albino deer. And I remember thinking how sad it was and kind of feeling like this connection to the deer and sadness for it, whereas like the context of how he had posted was it was this like kill of a lifetime, and there were people in the comments under this article being like really sad and against hunting such a like rare animal, and then people that were like, could you imagine like as hunters like getting this? And I was like, isn't that illegal? And I was like looking into it based off of jurisdictions and how I like sometimes I think in the space of otherness you can kind of feel and see yourself in things you wouldn't think to. And I grew up in a very like white Catholic school space, and I was just thinking about albinism in general and how I had watched a program about that featured on MTV True Life, if you remember back in the day, albinism. A deep cut for there you go. I was like, I did just turn 32, but like True Life was like such a funny, interesting show. But they had this really insightful episode on albinism, and I started like looking into it and thinking more about the context of being a minority within a minority group and just not being accepted by those people within your own community, where, you know, you're looking for self-love validation, seeing yourself and like not seeing yourself at all. And like as an Afro-Latina, which is a very new term within the Latina community at all, like I also didn't see myself representing telenovelas and other things. So I always sort of felt like I lived in this in-between when people already didn't know much about the Dominican diaspora or Guyanese or Indo-Guyanese, which still not a lot of people know about the history of in the communities that I'm sometimes find myself in. So I just also thought about albinism and this albino deer and talked to people in the community. First off, actually wanted to find a young girl with albinism that could take on this role and to have a conversation, since clearly I don't have albinism. And when we're presenting underrepresented communities, you need to dig deep and find out how and why and where like these conversations should go, because there's a lot of villains in like film that have albinism, and so there's been a huge history and context of that. True. So and usually they're not people of color. There was this film Powder way back
I was just thinking of Powder.
Which I didn't know about. Weirdly has a deer in it. I watched it like after I had written the film, but very different tone. But yeah, so I it was drawn off of this idea of colorism, which I had experienced, self-hatred against myself, but then also seeing it within the Dominican American diaspora, which was my experience because I hadn't been to the island until like the last 10 years. But yeah, and trying to understand where maybe this history came from, and then looking at a very specific community, which is young women of color with albinism who might be seen as white, and where does that, from multiple points of view, like the mother's perspective on the daughter's perceived whiteness and the peers and all of this. So
and I'm glad that you touched on the Dominican American community in particular, because, you know, again, like this is really tapping into so many levels of nuances, right? Because as someone from the Caribbean, right, which, you know, you relate to in one element of your background, right? We have colorism issues, particularly because we have so many different cultures in Trinidad where that come together, right? But then I've always been very exposed, but also fascinated by how different, I don't like to say minority, different non-white groups, whether it's Asian, Middle Eastern, etc., right? How they deal with colorism and that notion of whiteness, and how the Eurocentric beauty standards impact people of color around the world. But then what you highlight is a specific thing with the Dominican experience, right? Where the Afro-Latino influence, I think, is even stronger, right, than some other Latino communities. Yeah. So just unpack that a little bit. I know it's a lot, but, you know, talk to us about that within the Latino community specifically and the Dominican American point of view. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I grew up learning that being Dominican meant I was kind of this trifecta of Spanish, Taíno, native, indigenous blood, Indio, and then Black. But it didn't really go much deeper than that. And I kind of thought like, oh, I'm like equally all of these things. And like, I didn't grow up being like, I'm Black, because my mother didn't, and my mother's much more fair than I. And in terms of my abuelos, my grandparents, one's very fair, one's very dark, percent's Black, the other one woman, my abuela, looked like an East Asian woman to some people. Right. But yeah, but it was tricky because that was like the context of what I was taught until, you know, I learned more about the history from other Dominicans as well, where it's like, being the first place, Hispaniola, where Columbus landed, the Taínos are basically massacred on the island. So as opposed to like Central America and South America and even Puerto Rico, and there's just not a huge amount of native blood, depending on your family history, of course. And like my mom has like 7% indigenous blood, and it's still there. I have like 4%. When we, you know, did 23andMe and that whole context. But she's essentially like a biracial woman who's like half Iberian and half Black and West African. So yeah, I think that that is an interesting conversation. And I think that, like, you know, being Caribbean, that Blackness within every diaspora is different. Like, obviously I don't identify as African American because my parents weren't born in this country, and that's not my history. And as you mentioned, like being from Trinidad, our brother and sisters of Guyana, like I identify as Indo-Guyanese because my father isn't Black, and it's something that I also feel like I have some sort of education or to give people when they like see my dad, who presents very South Asian, Indian, and my sister, right. And it's like, oh, I don't understand. Wait, are there Indians in the Caribbean? And it's like, yes, indentured servants came to the Caribbean. Like here, and like I know that because that's my blood. Right. So yeah, and in both of these communities, I know you said to speak to Latine, but I experienced this in both colorism, because in South Asia there's a history of skin bleaching, and then in the Dominican Republic there's a very complicated history with Haiti. That is a Black country that first got their independence from France, and there's a lot of disparities sharing a same island in terms of crops and how revolution affected the two countries and resources. And it's I mean, I'm not like the most educated, but certainly creating my work around my background, there's a lot and lots of things that people should look into in terms of like continuing the conversation, and if they're interested in Dominican history. But you know, you come to this country, you want to assimilate. Yeah. It depends on what your family looks like. Most Latina families look very mixed, depending on what your background is and where your family is. Some are very white and still have family in Europe. Some, you know, have been like where my mom grew up is in the campo, in the middle of the country, and there's sometimes a little more indigenous blood there, and you know, it just depends. But I grew up kind of just knowing that there was this general background, and then later being like, oh, how do I want to relate to my Blackness? And I have cousins that are half Irish and look very white and don't relate to their Blackness, even if they're 25% like me. So it's like a complicated conversation. And I think as a storyteller and somebody who wants to unpack these things, like that's where like I wear very much on my sleeve every part of me and every facet. And
I love that.
Some people think, yeah, identity is complicated, but that's kind of the
Yeah.
long, short summary of it all.
No, but I think that's great. And it just highlights that point because, okay, we're celebrating Latin American Heritage Month, right? What does that really mean, right? Like there's so many different, sub-cultures within that. There's so many different ethnicities within that. And that goes for every group, right? That's non-white, but we're all kind of like lumped into these kind of very tight boxes. And this program and other things that we do at Soleil is really to help people understand those layers much better. So, you're like a walking, talking embodiment of that. And well, one quick question before we move to Marisa. There's a real conflict in the film that you portray really well, where the adults in the film all, in putting her on a pedestal of whiteness or beauty, right? They ignore her feelings. And then that's the very thing that the kids hate her for at school. So you see, I'll call her the auntie for now, right? But we know it's the friend's mother, right? You see her, kind of like almost fetishizing her in a way, and then the daughter hates her, and it really kind of brings all that into that scene where the daughter is like confronted with that a lot through her mother, right? So tell us a little bit about why you felt it was important to draw these contrasts within this character.
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of is just speaking to what I talked about in terms of generational education and how we learn, like we just learn these things and it's passed on generationally in terms of like what our background is, what is most valued and standards of beauty, which also, the media, now social media has a huge influence upon. And like this has always existed in film and literature, like The Bluest Eye is something that I went to in terms of talking about like a young girl's desire and also like in this sort of magical realism, surreal way, wanting to have something else that is also valued by the community around her. And like it doesn't even have to be as direct as being like valued for that one thing about you, but like it's silently present in everything. Like if it's the media that's being consumed or the people that your parents or people are complimenting or fellow family members having like a lot of like even more biracial family members who were, white or half white. And so yeah, it's interesting in terms of, thinking that what our parents and our grandparents valued and what they were talking about behind closed doors sometimes. I mean, this came up with the royal family, like, oh, the baby's light skin, thank God. It's not like this idea that they won't suffer as much. And it's interesting because albinism is a condition and there are so many, like you have vision impairment, there's sensitivity to light, you have to like, you can't go out on a very like sunny day, or you have to wear a special kind of prescription of like sunblock, and there are certain things that you can't like some people can't drive because of the vision impairment. I mean, it's very different in every person, but it's kind of just hypocritical and strange to think that people would just see your blue eyes and your blonde hair and be like, oh wow, how beautiful and like strange, and you look like a little cherub, because that's how our religion has like embodied like purity and like all of these things and the ideal. So yeah, I don't know if I exactly answered the question there.
No, this is good.
But I think I just wanted to speak to like how generationally we learn self-hatred and that it's not even our parents' fault because this is what they were taught. And I think like it's our job to break this cycle and be like, hey, curly hair is beautiful, natural hair is beautiful. I grew up with a mother who relaxed her hair all the time. And I in high school I like wore colored contacts and I like straightened my hair, and it was kind of like rock and roll, but it was also like something else I was doing. And now I wear my hair curly and like how it is, and I don't wear colored contacts anymore. And there's so many things that it's like you have to unlearn. So
right. No, that's awesome. Well, let's switch a little bit to Marisa. No es así de fácil. It's not that easy. So this is the reason we paired the two of you together is because like there was this really great connection between, you know, young women coming of age in these cultures, right? So explain the title of the film to us to start with, that it's not that easy. What were you trying to get at there?
All right, so here in Guatemala, it's very common to say like, oh, like, please don't be sad, like just have fun. And people usually go about saying like, I know it's not that easy, but get out of your head, have fun. And it's a really, really common phrase to use. Yo sé que no es así de fácil, pero like, it's not that easy, but please try. And well, I feel like it's very ironic and sort of unfair, because when you're actually not feeling well, even though words of encouragement are actually helpful, it's not that easy to get out of your head. And when you're dealing with stuff that's actually like, there's a phrase in Spanish, I'm trying to say it in English. Pero es 𝗧𝗛𝗓𝗦𝗡𝗚, when something is eating you up inside, that's
like not visible, not as right.
Yeah. Well, it's not that easy. And I sort of wanted to, I mean, the whole point of the film is to empathize with that. Like, it's okay to have it not be easy, because it's a reality. I mean, I went through like my puberty was like that. It was like the film, except for like 4 years. And well, yeah, that's sort of kind of what I wanted to portray.
Okay, so this was deeply personal, which is actually going to be my next question. But I'm really glad that you explained that, because, you know, if you take it on its face, you get the second part of your explanation. But the first part, that this is something that people say, and it basically just stifles a lot of struggles that people have that aren't visible, mental illness, you know, issues with weight, things like that, right? Self-concepts and all of that. That's how it's kind of like whisked away, like, it's not that easy, but get over it, basically, right? So that's really great context. Thanks for explaining that. So, okay, so contextualize then the, you talk about how personal it was, right, to you, that this was your adolescence, basically, where there were 𝗚's insecurities through the film. And, you know, the most visible one was her relationship with food, right? Her fear of food, her hiding her weight. Could you tell us about the culture in Guatemala when it comes to body image, weight, diet, eating? What kinds of messages do young girls receive on TV, through ads, and just in the society?
I mean, first off, like, since we're really close to the States, a lot of the influence we get from you guys. For example, here, the films that come to the cinemas are mostly Hollywood films, not independent films, not other Latin American films. Mostly, I mean, because the thing that sells is Hollywood. So pretty much the influence you guys get is the influence we get, except on a even bigger commercial scale, I may say. So
yeah, they still
yeah,
pick the
I
big
mean,
blockbusters and stuff, right? They still pick the biggest. Not you don't even get the second level of independence, so to speak. Yeah.
No. I mean, we're still pretty much in diapers, our industry, trying to get even more films. I mean, I believe the film industry here in Guate has been growing so much, and there are so many independent filmmakers making beautiful pieces of work. But still, it's been a challenge to have some visibility on the filmmaker side. And well, yeah, as I said, like, the influence we pretty much get is that. So thin women, I mean, pretty much basically white thin women. And since the film is very personal, I mean, I would like to say that the whole project was built within like a week. a week and a half. The script was written in a week and a half. It was pre-produced in a week and a half. The actress, the lead actress, we casted her a day before we started filming because we had so little time, and we filmed this in 2020. So because of COVID, much of the process was done through Zoom. The casting was done through Zoom. Rehearsals were done through Zoom. So it was, but because since I had so little time, I had no time to research anything other than, well, the things that I knew, my personal experience, and have myself like undress and have my feelings be naked on the film.
So on that note, you know, kind of tying a little bit back to even the conversation with Gabriella, but I'm going to spin it a little bit in terms of that whole public perception of beauty, but the opposite way, like how Latin American women present themselves, right? And obviously that varies by culture, but I'll give you an example. Growing up in Trinidad, for me, I always felt like Latin women seemed so much more confident in their bodies, you know, they were dressed with, you know, bolder colors and just like, you know, just like there was a sensuality I would say, you know, that I always felt, you know, wow, like there's so much confidence there, you know. Is that also, you would say, the case in Guatemala? And in the film, you show her covering her body when all the other girls, they have their off-the-shoulder tops, and, you know, was that something you were getting out there? Is that a thing? I'm curious.
Well, I mean, as I said, this is really personal. I mean, this is the whole perception I had of my body. I actually never thought about, since I had so little time, I dig deep into myself, not thinking about like any other. I wrote it thinking somebody must also feel this way,
Okay.
and I hope people empathize with that. But I don't know. I feel like here in Guatemala, there's also a segment. I mean, I couldn't generalize because yes, there are many women dressing with bright colors and crop tops, but there are also beautiful textiles with, I mean, that are not necessarily central, but really representative of the culture. So I don't feel like I have a concrete answer of that, just that it was my personal experience, and I wouldn't feel right with the little information I have to generalize it.
Right. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm glad that you said that. Because again, like we only know what we are exposed to, right? I see, Gabriella, you're nodding a lot to that. Like, would you agree?
Yeah, a generalization. I think it's like that same thing that when we talk to topics as filmmakers, it's like for the audience to also consume and share their experiences, and you can't speak to everything, so that resonates. Yeah, nuance.
Okay. All right. Well, while we let the audience ask their questions, I'm going to open it up for you guys again, because you guys are chatting so much during the film, which is great. And any questions that you had earlier on, please put it to the bottom of the chat so that we could ask all the questions and not miss you. So while we do this, there are a couple questions for both of you guys. Both films choose really young protagonists, right? Do you find that these kinds of insecurities manifest more in youth or in adulthood? And both of these are very personal for both of you, so you can answer from your own personal experience.
I mean, if I may step in, I chose teenagers because I feel like it's the most uncomfortable stage for everyone. I mean, when you're a teenager, you're not a kid, but you're not an adult. So it's like you're still, I mean, it's a coming of age film where you're finding out who you are, how to be, and how to come about with your body and all the changes we're going through. And there's also, I mean, for me, the fact that a lot of my friends started dating since we turned like 13, 14. It changed a lot the perception I had about myself too. So yeah, for me, being a teenager is, I'm sorry for all the kids out there that are
Oh, it's
going through
even worse
puberty right
now,
now.
right? Yeah, with all this
Yeah.
social media just bombarding, like I can't
Yes.
imagine. I really can't imagine. It's like what we felt times 10, you know? Gabriella, what
Yeah,
about you?
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I just made a short film called 𝗙𝗕𝗢𝗧𝗏 that's actually doing the festival circuit. I was just thinking my bio's like a little off, but that also played more so with social media than this. Like the young girl in it is like 8 and is like on social media because her mother's a celebrity. But so that is so true. And I actually chose the young girl in Leche to be 9 or 10 because I think that's the age, especially for young girls specifically, when we start taking note of what makes us different from other people and what these beauty standards are. I don't think up until that point there's kind of this innocence of like everyone's kind of more or less the same. And I remember like young kids suddenly pointing out skin color or like, why is your arm, are your arms hairy, or like whatever it was that they were going to deconstruct that was around that age. And also on the playground, things start getting a lot nastier if they're going to get nastier. And I think women know how to be, you know, a little meaner to each other sometimes than even male identifying folks. So yeah, we learn a little bit, and maybe it's also because, you know, as women we're pushed down a lot, how to like where this hierarchy, social hierarchy comes into place.
We're crabs in a
So I
barrel.
think
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so I think like around 9 and 10, which is when girls, you know, the younger girls start getting their periods and, you know, we're talked about our bodies and our bodies are changing. That's when all of these things come into play. And then I would agree. Adolescence is when it's, I mean, teenage years is when it's the worst because then you've kind of come into this body, it's still changing, and then dating and all these other things come into the picture. And you start tearing yourself apart if you're going to.
Yeah.
And the self-love journey continues from there. And it's, yeah, it's a lifelong road, though, I do think.
Yeah, definitely. And
Yeah.
varying degrees, you know, for sure. And so based on that, then, you know, as two women who have gone through these insecurities, you've made films about it, right? What do you want audiences, and particularly female audiences, to take away from these films? Like, what would be your message to that young girl looking at this story in both cases? Gabriella, you go. You look like you're good.
I was just saying, you're beautiful just the way you are. Words have their power. Microaggressions exist. I don't know, just yeah, be careful with the energy you're putting out in the world towards other girls and towards yourself and how you're presenting yourself. There's a lot of pressure now, like again with social media, to create a false identity. And you don't have to, like, we curate everything in our lives as artists too. We're constantly our films are we're in a frame, right? So we're not showing everything. And that's how we see the world, and especially as storytellers, how we choose like to also frame and show the world that we live in our own personal experience. But yeah, self-love is really important, and it's not easy, and you're gonna grow and learn, and one day you might look back at yourself and realize, you know, how far you've come. I don't know. Be kind to yourself, maybe.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I would say copy paste and then add that yes, it's not that easy and it's okay for have it not be that easy. I mean, you're beautiful, and take in account that it's always worse in your head than it actually is. Like, especially as a kid, as a teenagers, we see things bigger than they actually are, and perhaps even some adults, I don't know, but kinds of body, everyone has a different kind of body, and I mean, that's what makes the world such a beautiful place, the fact that everyone is so different, and uh, not only physically, but also, I mean, authentically, like personality. Diversity is what makes the world such a wonderful place. So be proud of who you are. That's
Those are great answers, guys. We're definitely gonna highlight those. So a lot of audience questions. So I'm gonna cut my last question and jump right to them, because you guys have sparked really, I think there are a lot of women on here too. So I think this is sparking a lot of conversation. One interesting, a few of these you answered, so I'm gonna pick out one that's really interesting here. Okay, from Quinn, both directors are very attached to their films, so kind of have a piece of themselves in them. How do you show and tell these tough topics without feeling drained? Marisa, I saw your eyes.
I mean, for me, it's very a particular case, since it's my first short film. I mean, I've worked in film previously as a producer, as an actress, but it's the first piece I ever directed. So whenever I look at it, whenever I talk about it, and since it's so personal, of course, there's always gonna be like a little drainage of emotion, but it's more like in a cathartic way. I feel like every time I talk about it, I learn a little bit more about myself, about how I've grown ever since I filmed it. And of course, there's the fact that every time I watch it, there are many things that I love, and there are many things that I tell myself like, "Ugh, I should have done," and things that I would have known probably done different. So it's sort of like a love-hate relationship, but overall, yeah, I would say it's not that draining. It's more like a cathartic experience where I just keep learning and learning about myself and about it, and about how to come about the process of filmmaking and now future projects.
Gabriella?
Yeah. And for me, I think I try to include an element of magical realism or surrealism, because I think it's something that's really powerful within the medium to be able to not digest things easier, but maybe frame them a different way, or introduce some sort of escapism element, which I do think is a part of like dealing with our own insecurities. And you do that so beautifully in your film as well, Marisa, when she's like in her own void and in her own space. And I love that in my feature. There's like this dance sequence and these young girls are like, everything slows down and she's a fly on the wall. And I think those kinds of things are like, you know, how you feel, and you disassociate a lot when you're dealing with these insecurities. So for me, it can be heavy, but I try to create protagonists that, you know, have certain similarities but are different. And then sometimes there are the stories and scripts that I'm writing that are so close to home, and I've yet to make one of those. I'm kind of playing with getting one started, and I think that'll be a different kind of training experience in terms of also sharing how much and how specifically certain things are your own journey. But I think it's important to like, also as directors, dump it on the page if you have the time. I'm impressed by how everything came together for your short, Marisa. But yeah, and deconstruct it a little bit and see how you can play with the medium and the art form and tell the story in a new way, so that, yeah, everything doesn't feel maybe as heavy for you throughout the process, and there can be new revelations.
Oh, that's great, guys. Those are really profound answers. Like I want to ask more questions, but I don't want to cheat the audience. So I'm gonna switch to another one. There are many. Okay. Someone is asking, Marisa, in your short, what is the blue light supposed to signify?
It's her head. I mean, it's the dark place that she's in her head. I mean, I think it's to a point very literal, but it's this metaphor I created for like what she really wants to do. It's in that blue light, in that safe space in her head, and not in a party where she feels sort of exposed.
And then Gabriella, I think this is a similar kind of question. Is the purple nightmare supposed to represent purgatory? And what does that represent in your short?
The kind of dawn, yeah, dusky scene, actually it's dusk, isn't purgatory, but it can be if, like, you dissect. I mean, they're kind of, I mean, the woods are always this in-between space. I saw a lot of conversation about, like, those kids are going into the woods, which personally, I also was just like, I grew up in the suburbs. I talked to a lot of friends who grew up near the woods, and they're like, it's kind of crazy looking back on how my parents didn't care, and this is just this open playground. And I think being children of immigrants, yes, there was kind of a like, oh, we're going out, but that's not something you see a lot of brown girls go do. Like the little white boys are running away into the woods mostly. But yeah, in the feature, there's actually a little more nuance to developing why that happens. But yeah, I think it creates an aura and an atmosphere and a sense of yeah, danger. It's not literally purgatory, but it's like they're in this moment that kind of is in between things, and death is kind of like a potential being in such a dangerous situation, and there's hunters in the woods. And in my work, color plays a huge role, and everything was kind of desaturated to play up the whiteness and the innocence and this kind of world. Yeah, I have work that's super saturated and has to do with other things. So yeah, that was that intentionality.
All right, guys, I can't ask all the questions. I'm so sorry, but they're all so good. I'll just ask one more. That's for the both of you, right? Joy Q is asking, how do you choose which topics you want to tackle? And how do you get the inspiration to get started? That sounds like a filmmaker to filmmaker question.
I'm happy to go first. That's okay.
Yeah, sure. Jump in. Sorry, I should cue you.
No, you're fine. Yeah, I think I'm inspired by two things, either my own experiences, which we both kind of unpacked, like things that are impersonal or personal here, or issues that I encounter. I mean, it's all personal experience, I think. And then, I mean, in the case of Leche, it was like an article that then went deeper into my own experience of colorism. The other feature I'm writing has to do with sex tourism in the DR. And coincidentally, then I was interviewed to direct a feature that had to do with sex tourism in the DR, which is a global issue that's also very nuanced. And so that the film I directed that's going to be playing in festivals, hopefully, in the next cycle in the spring, is called Boca Chica. And that inspiration came from living in the north coast of the DR and seeing how that sort of industry of sex work fueled also young women's perspectives on themselves, and in like Latin America and the Caribbean, where tourism is a huge source of income, and how, you know, our countries fuel themselves in many ways, and agriculture, and, you know, all these things, and how do some women find empowerment through sex work, and how it can really oppress others, and how with our film we specifically talk about how young women, it's a very dangerous and situation and illegal in the backdrop of like a young girl, you know, finding her voice but living in this kind of community. So I think just listening and opening my eyes, and then trying to see if it's something that I can contribute to the conversation, because I don't think every story is for every person to tell. I certainly think everyone can bring an interesting take to a story. I don't think there should be policing necessarily on who can tell what stories, but I think you should have like a good lens of like, okay, this inspires me and I think I can contribute to the conversation here. I'm not going to be able to say everything about this, but what is it about myself and my own experiences that will allow me to like bring more information, open a deeper conversation around this and a new perspective. So that's how I tend to like decide what I'm passionate about pursuing, because filmmaking is very hard. No es fácil. It takes forever. You need the money. Sometimes you have weird constraints. It can take a week, or it can take 20 years to tell one of these stories. So it's pretty precious what you invest in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Marisa?
I love everything you said, Gabriella. With film, it has to be pretty precious to invest your time, all of your resources, and I mean, when you're directing, it's like you're also in charge of this whole group of people, your crew, that you also need to take care about and take into consideration. So yeah, it's, for me, well, the thing is, I feel like with art and filmmaking especially, it's always going to be personal. I mean, whether it's the film I watched that made me cry, it's because it resonated with me in a deeper personal way. And I get inspired, of course, by personal stories, but also by things that I mean, I can see that are bothering me, and I want to give it a little more visibility. And especially, I mean, here in Guatemala, I mean, I grew up wanting to go to the United States because I felt like it was going to be easier for me to study and make films out there, because the industry here is so small. But now that I'm studying film here and I've grown and I've come to age, I realized that what I want to do is make films here, make every film in Spanish, and give visibility to the world I live in, not just the reality that's represented on other films in Guatemala that are beautiful and amazing, but I want to contribute to also give visibility so other people like me can also feel identified on screen with the characters that are created, with other issues that also need to be talked about. And of course, I really agree with what Gabriella said, that you need to take into account what you can bring to the conversation, and if it's your place to tell it. That's also something that I think a lot before creating a project. But yeah.
Good. Actually, as you just said that, I'll squeeze this one in. I can't remember who asked it, but someone, because you are our first filmmaker from Guatemala, Marisa, someone asked if you could recommend Guatemalan films to watch.
Yes.
Or by Guatemalan directors, even.
Yes. I mean, the 𝗷𝗛𝗓𝗏 trilogy is beautiful, really beautiful work. 𝗔𝗕𝗢𝗏𝗡𝗚, Temblores, La Llorona. Then I love this film called Luz by Javier Borrallo. And the story of how they created that film is really beautiful, because it's a film that was inspired by a Guatemalan musician. So the film was written based on the album of the musician, and then the whole thing is written, directed, same cinematographer, and I believe the director also played the drums on the official score of the film. So the director did 4 things, and it's really beautiful work. I mean, those probably are my 4 films that I have on top of mind, but I encourage you to
we do
Can I give a
something.
shout out to Dominican cinema as well?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, please.
No, I mean, I had the pleasure of directing a film in my mother's country that it really feels like a gift, and yeah. And so some of the films that have come out this past year that are really exciting, that are playing in festivals, and hopefully we'll get some sort of distribution globally. I know this is a global community watching, is Candela, and then Carajita, that has been playing at a lot of festivals, was just at the New York Latino Film Festival. I believe won Best International Feature. Miriam Miente is on HBO Max in the States, I believe still. And Dolores de Arena is a really awesome quiet piece. It's about sex tourism as well, with a lesbian couple. And then another film that kind of inspired Leche, or like didn't inspire, but afterwards I was watching a lot of things around colorism, is Pelo Malo. it's Venezuelan, not Dominican, but it's about a young kid's perspective on
it's
that
Venezuelan.
and self-love, a young male, character who, so it's worth watching. But
would you guys mind after
share in the chat?
Yes, put it in the YouTube chat for everybody.
Because right now I don't want two more films that are yes, but just quickly, 2 LGBT films here in Guatemala. One is directed by a woman. It's the second, I believe. I'm sorry if I'm wrong. The director of fiction to do a feature film. I mean, we have a lot of directors that are working on documentaries, but only 2 women have directed feature films here in Guate. So one of them is 𝗙𝗕𝗢𝗪𝗡𝗧𝗏. It's an LGBT film, and it's really beautiful. And then there's another film called 𝗧𝗛𝗔𝗖𝗜𝗡𝗚, also LGBT, and that film does an amazing sort of documentary work on portraying lots of sceneries from Guatemala. So,
well, this is awesome because every Sunday we on our social media we do something called Soleil Selects. We also have that on our website too. So I'm gonna call out the social team. I hope you guys are getting all this down because they just gave us our Soleil Selects for the rest of the month. I mean, this is awesome. Thank you guys so much. This was really good. So last question for both of you for us to close is, what's next for you? Gabriella, I know you talked a little bit about it, so anything that you might not have mentioned before. And Marisa, what's next for you guys? And for both of you, tell the audience how people could keep up with you, with your work. Marisa, you could go first. Yeah.
Okay. So right now I'm pre-producing my next short film. It's called Hero. I'm about to film it, I believe, on January or February 2023. And I'll be posting on social media updates on how the film is going. And yeah, that's that for me. It's gonna be my thesis from school.
Oh, awesome. Congrats. That's huge.
Thank you.
Gabriella?
Awesome. I'm excited to watch that, Marisa. For me, I have seen Raíces is in festivals. I'll be announcing some more of where that is you can follow me. My website is GabriellaAthinaMoses.com. It might be, it shares the A. So maybe I'll if you follow me on Instagram, it's easier to maybe find my work, which is at Miss Mad Hatter 005 MISS Mad Hatter MADHATTER 005. Weird handle. I should maybe change it. But I post about some of my work there and a lot about running because I'm running the New York Marathon. So that's next for me right now. Not film related, but a lot like filmmaking, running. Boca Chica, my first feature, should be hopefully in festivals next year, Spanish language film. And then I hope to make Leche the feature. It's my baby. I've been trying to make it for 6 years. So if you're an investor or where you want to see a Latina folk horror, magical realism film, the feature goes into Santeria more. And
so have you started shooting?
And I hope I make it.
Have you started shooting?
The feature, no, but we have the script ready. We have 50% of the financing.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. Well, guys, ladies, thank you so much. You are awesome. These films are really great. So happy we did this today. And you could tell from the reaction, the comments, it opened my world to things I thought I knew about. Personally, I want to thank you guys so much for that. Marisa, thanks for adding another country to our list. It's great to have.
Thank you guys for inviting me.
Yeah, and I saw some Guatemalans in the chat that were really excited as well. So great job, guys. So thanks everyone for tuning in to Short Film Saturdays. We want to make sure that you keep up with what's happening with SoleSpace. Our next Short Film Saturday is October 8th. We're actually going to have a Sundance award-winning film by a Saudi Arabian filmmaker, Raed Al-Semari. Really great film. So definitely don't miss that. So we're back in the Middle East next Saturday. And if you want to keep up with all of the programming for Short Film Saturdays and other things happening on SoleSpace, follow us on our new website, www.solespace.com. And if you liked what you saw today, subscribe to this YouTube channel, follow us on Instagram at soleil.space, and follow these two filmmakers as well. So thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Mika. Thanks, Marisa. Ciao.
Thank you, Gabriella. Nice to meet you, and Mika for all the space. It was wonderful.
Thank you, guys. It was really great.